This is a demonstration of how to put the dish soap onto the frosted mylar drafting film as a release agent for water-based monotype. So I'm using a sponge. You could also use like a wide paintbrush, and you just want to get a thin, even layer on your film. And once you've applied this, you want it to dry completely before you start to paint. You need to dampen your paper before you can print. If you're using a heavier watercolor paper, you would want to soak it in water for at least a half hour. If you're using Arches 88, soak it for maybe 15 minutes. You'll be able to tell the heavier watercolor paper that's sized stays really stiff even if you've just put it in the water. Whereas an unsized paper like the Arches 88 gets soggy right away. If you want to use a lighter weight paper such as this Japanese mulberry paper, I might not even put it in the water tub, but dip in a piece of office paper, let the excess run off, and then lay your mulberry paper on top of that and put the whole thing in a plastic bag to let the moisture even out. Now I'm going to show you how to paint the monotype. So I've already coated this with a thin layer of dish soap and let it dry. And this is optional. You can have a drawing that you place underneath your plate to guide your painting, but you can also do it totally freehand. For the most intense color, use the watercolor or gouache straight out of the tube. And you can use any kind of watercolor brush for painting this. It'd be fun to have a variety of sizes so you could experiment. You don't want the colors to be very thick either because they're going to dry completely and you'll need your water, the water from the damp paper, to be able to re-wet them. So if they're too thick or overlapped too much, the paper may not be able to re-wet them. Now you're ready to print when your paper has been soaking long enough and the paint on your plate is dry. When you take your paper out of the water, let the water drip off so it's no longer coming off in a steady stream. And then you'll see how the paper is shiny. You don't want it to be shiny when you print with it. You want to blot off that excess water. So you can use 2 towels, or I have 2 pieces of blotter paper here. But towels will work just as well. You can just smooth it between your hands. Or you can use one of your pressing tools, like a Baron, or a rolling pin or something, just to make sure that all of the excess water is absorbed. And you'll know that the excess water is absorbed when the paper doesn't have any shiny spots on it anymore. Now to print, lay your damp paper on top of your dry plate. And sometimes when paper is damp, if you rubbed a Baren directly over the back, it might tear the paper. So I use parchment paper, which is sold as a non-stick baking surface. It's usually a silicone coated as opposed to a wax paper. And lay that over, and then press with your pressing tool. If you have a wooden spoon, you'll use the back of the wooden spoon. I have a fan going, so that's why parchment paper is going all over. So you can just press with the back of the wooden spoon all over the surface. And with the bowl of the wooden spoon, you basically have one pressure point. I prefer using a Baren because this has many, many pressure points, so it's faster. And I slide my fingers under the handle, and then I curl my hand around so that the heel of my hand is applying pressure with the Baren, just as if I was rubbing my fist on the table like this. And I usually print standing up, so I can use my whole arm to apply pressure. And circular motions all around. You can lift a corner to check and see that your image is coming through. It's transferring, and it looks like it is. I'll just give it one more rub. And carefully lift a corner and then just peel it back from your plate. And that's how my print looks. I have another piece of paper soaking, and there's just a tiny bit of color left on my plate, so I'm going to try and pull what's called a ghost print. And this is a different kind of paper. This is a piece of watercolor paper. And I'm going to go ahead and blot that, because remember, it's shiny. Now that my blotting paper is a little wet, I might just use the parchment paper on it to blot it. For a ghost print, you for sure want to make sure you're pressing pretty hard. You don't really need to worry about holding your parchment paper in place, because all of the movement that's happening is happening between the parchment paper and the Baren. The paper is not sliding on the plate, so that won't matter. So I use my other hand to hold the table away from the parchment. So this is the ghost print. It just picks up what's remaining on the plate. Now on the left you see our ghost print, and then in the center our first print that we took from the plate, and on the right hand side you see the plate. Now notice that the print and the ghost print are both a mirror image of the original painting that we made.